Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another card video at my YouTube channel and blog. Today I'm going to be playing with some Distress Oxide inks, specifically these three colors: Worn Lipstick, Fossilized Amber, and Broken China. This is my first time using Distress Oxide inks and I had a lot of fun playing with them. So I hope you guys will try out this technique soon too. So I have a plastic bag here. This is a plastic sandwich bag. This is the type that does not have a little zip or closure on it. These are very affordable, and if you don't want to use these sandwich bags, you could use a piece of cling wrap or saran wrap or something like that. So I'm pressing my ink pads down onto the surface. I'm just adding some ink. And the whole idea is that I'm then going to add water on top of the inks, and then I can lift this up and press it down onto my watercolor paper. And it gives me a little bit more, it gives me a way to manipulate the inks a little bit more. It's a little bit like ink smushing or ink smooshing, but I kind of like this more because I have more control over where the ink goes. And you'll see in a minute here what I mean. So I'm spraying that plastic bag. And then I'm going to turn my watercolor paper over on top of it. This is just the easiest way to do it instead of lifting that paper bag over on top. Or I'm sorry, plastic bag. Okay, so here's where the advantage of using a really pliable plastic bag works to my advantage. I'm now using my fingers to spread the ink around, and I can see through the bag what the ink is doing, and I can also use my fingers to really smush it around, and then I can gently lift up that bag and I'm left with the color on my paper. So I had quite a bit of water on there and some puddles forming, so I used a paper towel to sop up some of that ink, and then I used a heat tool just to speed up the drying process. If you don't have a heat tool, you don't need it for this portion of the technique. I did that just to speed up the drying process. You can definitely let it dry by just letting it sit there in the air if you'd like. So I had some ink left on my plastic bag, so I smushed that on once more. And I think in hindsight, I probably would have skipped this step, or I would have spritzed the bag a little bit more with water, because there wasn't quite enough ink on there to get enough splotches on there. So now I'm using the Stripe Builder stamp set from Concord and Ninth, and I'm going to heat emboss some clear stripes onto my watercolor paper. So I put that in my MISTI tool. You definitely don't have to use a MISTI tool for this. I just thought I would since I have one that's handy. So I'm prepping my watercolor paper with an anti-static powder tool and then stamping those stripes in Versamark ink. So this technique today that I'm using, I'm going to call Distress Oxide Resist Layering. So I'm going to do some heat embossing on this with some clear heat embossing powder. This is a clear powder from Ranger, and I will heat set that until it's smooth and melted with my heat tool. It's hard to see the stripes on there, but you can sort of see it turned in the light right there. So here's where that resist layering comes into effect. I'm doing more of that inking on the same sandwich bag. I just wiped it clean before moving on. And now I'm adding those colors back on. I'm going to go ahead and spritz that bag one more time and do the same exact steps. So I'm going to pick up my watercolor paper and press it down onto those ink droplets. And then I can use the bag to flip it over. And I can smush around. So it's a little bit hard to see right now where all those stripes are, but once I lift up the plastic bag, you'll be able to see where all of those stripes are located. So I'm going to smush this around a little bit, make sure I get that worn lipstick smushed around, and then I'll lift this up. So the areas where the color is really pooling, those are the areas where there is not embossing powder. The melted embossing powder resists any of the wet color put on top, and so those areas where it's beaded up on the surface, that's on top of some embossing. So I'm going to use my paper towel and sop up some of this color. I was getting sort of a muddy green color on that one side, and I wanted to kind of minimize that color, so I will eventually kind of wipe off some of that color. Right now I'm cleaning off the embossed stripes, just wiping those down to get the color off. And then I can use the paper towel to sop up some of that green color that I wasn't really a fan of. So I'm just going to kind of very lightly sop some of that up. And then I took my heat tool and I heat set this to quickly dry it. So my, let's see, what did I call it? Distress Oxide Resist layering is almost done. I'm just going to add a little bit of water on top, some water droplets that I've put water into the palm of my hand and then flicked onto the paper. And those droplets drop. Just like regular Distress inks, Distress Oxide ink reactivates with water. So it's really fun to add water droplets on top and pick it up with a paper towel, and you'll see where those droplets were located or where they fell onto the paper. I think it's a really cool effect. So I'll hit that with my paper towel, and now I'm going to dry it with my heat tool. So after I had this entire background all finished, I trimmed it down to the size of a card front, and then I die cut some pieces out of white cardstock. I used Neenah Solar white cardstock and the Mr. and Mrs. die from Paper Smooches. I die cut that 3 times because I'm going to stack them all together to make this die cut a little bit more substantial, so it'll stand up off the surface of the card front. So I held the die cut with my tweezers and then dabbed on some little tiny dots using some Ranger Multimedia Matte adhesive. And I really like to use that particular adhesive because when it dries, it won't be shiny. So if any of it oozes out from behind the die cut, it's not a huge deal. And when I press these die cuts together, I like to actually pick up the die cut and use my fingers to kind of feel around the edges and make sure everything's lined up as best as possible. So I'm adding more of those dots onto another die cut, and then I'll press that on top of the 2 that are already adhered together. So in total, I have 3 die cuts stacked on top of each other. I think you could actually stack 4 or 5, maybe even 6, and have a really substantial die cut, really beefy. Put those under an acrylic block so they could dry. And now I'm using the New Beginning stamp set from Paper Smooches. You'll notice that it has a large Mr. and Mrs. stamp, and that coordinates with the die. And I'm using a little tiny word stamp that says congrats. I've stamped and embossed that in white embossing powder on top of some Simon Says Stamp Fog cardstock. It's a really nice pale gray, and I thought it would set off the pale colors in my background. So I've melted that with my heat tool, and then I'm using some scissors just to trim this out. So I'm going to go ahead and create my card base. I'm using some Neenah Solar White cardstock in the 110 pound version, and I've scored that at 5.5 to create a top folding card. I'm then going to take some Tombow Extreme adhesive and add that to the back of my watercolor piece. I particularly love this adhesive for adhering watercolor backgrounds because it's such a strong adhesive. I don't ever have any problem with the watercolor paper curling up or coming unstuck to my card base. So I'm adding some more dots with that Ranger Multimedia Matte to the back of my stack of die cuts, and then I'll press that down onto the front of the card. I'm going to go ahead and put my acrylic block on top of that just to help it dry a little bit and make sure it doesn't peel up. And then I added a little strip of foam tape behind that congrats piece. I'll use my tweezers to hold that piece while I position it on the card, and then I'll put it down in the bottom corner. I wanted it to say congrats, Mr. and Mrs., but I couldn't find a good spot for the word to go, so I ended up putting it down below. Now I have 2 sizes of Darice Crystal sequins. This is the 8mm size and the 5mm size. And I'm picking up those sequins with my tweezers and then squirting out a little tiny itty bitty dot of adhesive. This is my favorite way to adhere sequins, and I've actually sent cards with the mail and haven't had any sequins come undone or be floating around in the envelope when the recipient receives it. So that is my card for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you'll try out these distress inks, oxide inks. This technique would probably work with regular distress inks as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next video.